first question I'd like to ask you as a Conservative Member of Parliament, as someone who got into power off the back of a manifesto that promised to keep taxes low, that promised an enterprise economy, that promised free markets, is what's the point in voting Conservative if all this government has done is raise the tax burden to historic highs?
Well, I certainly support the ambition to have lower taxes and absolutely to support enterprise and free markets. But we have to recognise we've had absolutely unprecedented events since the 2019 election. I mean, first of all, pandemic, which was, had caused huge economic disruption, was very expensive to give the relief to businesses and individuals. And then secondly, the energy price rise because of Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And previously, no governments have had to deal with such massive shocks back to back like that. And that's why public spending has gone up and why taxes are going up as well. It's not that the government wants to do this. I don't think any Conservative wants to put up taxes. I don't think the Chancellor wants to put up taxes. But the most important thing is actually to reassure to fill the fiscal black hole, to reassure the international economy that Britain is a good country to invest in, and that means having sound finance, and that is what the main objective of the Chancellor is today.
But ultimately, these are political choices being made today. The tens of billions of pounds in tax rises was not the only path that the Chancellor could have chosen. He could have chosen to be more austere on spending in certain areas. One obvious example that has been toyed with by the previous Prime Ministers but has been stuck to now, we assume, is of course that of the issue of the pensions triple lock. The idea that we should raise the level at which we pay pensions to all pensioners by over 10%, as opposed to perhaps means testing it so only the poorest pensioners would get that increase. What's the logic behind spending billions of pounds on a double-digit increase for even pensioners who are millionaires?
So I have to say, I don't know what the Chancellor's going to announce today. We have to wait another couple of hours to find out. But you're right, it's a choice. I mean, as Liam Halligan was saying earlier, all budgets are choices. We do have to fill the fiscal black hole, but that can be done in different ways. You can either cut spending more, as you say, or you can cut taxes or raise taxes. And the political decision is what's the balance between those two. And there's no perfect way of doing it. It is ultimately a political decision. And I think most people in Britain would support protecting the NHS, health spending. We know there's huge backlogs on the NHS after the pandemic, and I'm confident the Chancellor will do that. And also protect schools. Very important that education system is still funded. So there are limits. Those are two big budgets. So there are limits to how much you can cut public spending overall. But you're right, there are other choices. You mentioned pensions. I mean, the welfare budget overall is about £250 billion. We'll wait to see what the Chancellor does with that. And maybe there will be some variation on the triple lock that he'll look at. As I say, we've only got a couple of hours to wait to find out. But there was a manifesto commitment on the triple lock, and as somebody who's elected on that manifesto, I'm very keen to stick with as many manifesto commitments and not break them as possible. And the same will be true with the income tax and national insurance and VAT. That was the lock on the taxes, not increasing those main rates of taxes. And again, I'd be surprised if the Chancellor broke that manifesto commitment. But the triple lock.
It does just seem that this is a government that is more willing. It just does seem that this is a government that is more willing to break its pledges on tax than its pledges on spend. For example, the manifesto said that the 19% rate of corporation tax was attracting investment. It decried the Labour Party for wanting to raise corporation tax, and then, of course, that's exactly what this government did. Should we be worried that this is a government that seems much more at ease raising taxes than cutting spending?
Well, I don't think it is a government that's at ease with raising taxes. As I said, I'm really sure that the Chancellor and certainly the Prime Minister don't want to raise taxes unless they really don't see any other option that isn't far more damaging. But you mentioned corporation tax. I mean, the issue there is that the the government had consistently since 2010 cut corporation tax to 19% in the belief that it would encourage more investment by businesses. But actually, what we now know, with the benefit of hindsight, is actually it hasn't really encouraged more investment by the business. So there's an increasing economic evidence that if you want to use tax cuts to encourage business investments, and I think that's a good idea, then actually you should target the tax relief at business investment. That's a particular tax relief that exists, and make that more generous. We've got the super deduction that was brought in, and then there's other things, the annual investment allowance for businesses that Kwasi Kwarteng increased to £1 million a year, and we'll see whether that will be carried on today. But actually, those targeted investments are far better ways of encouraging investment by business. Those targeted tax reliefs are better ways of encouraging investment by business rather than just a generic corporation tax cuts, and that is that there's increasing sort of economic consensus that that's the case, and that's why the government changed position, or at least this version of the government, which you've seen as Chancellor and Prime Minister, changed position on corporation tax from what had been the position back in 2010.
Now, originally, this sort of second statement that we were expecting around this time, of course, under Liz Truss, was going to be talking about the long-term or medium-term future of the country. And it was going to focus as well, not just on tax and spend, but on supply-side reform, on the reform that is necessary to raise the growth rate of this country. Has this new government abandoned that programme of supply-side reform, abandoned that sense of a growth agenda?
I really don't think it has. And this one thing I'll definitely be looking for in the autumn statement today is measures to promote economic growth. I mean, I've been quite consistent publicly in saying we need a really laser-like focus on promoting economic growth. A lot of the problems we have as a country is that growth has been sluggish for the last 15 years or so. So earnings haven't increased as fast as they otherwise would, and that means that the government gets less tax and so on. Things would be a lot easier if we had high levels of economic growth. But what we learned from this Truss period is that if you lose the confidence of international markets, then you pay a very, very heavy price. Ultimately, we do have a big national debt. We do depend on these markets for all the national debt that we have. They fund it. If we lose their confidence, then we pay far higher rates of interest. That's expensive for the government. It's expensive for people who are renewing their mortgages. And there was a few weeks there where mortgage rates suddenly went up. And I'm very glad that actually mortgage rates have gone back down to the level they were before.